Happy New Year, Harold. It's good to be back, and I think we're going to be in for a very busy year in BC politics again. Already, the Premier had his first news conference this week. He's on his way to India next week on a major trade mission, so he's busy.
Right. India, that's an interesting choice. Explain
Yeah.
that to us. Yeah.
Well, not that long ago, British Columbia was not very happy with India, just like Canada wasn't very happy with India. There was the Sikh leader here, Nijar, who was killed, and an accusation that India was involved some way. And as far as I know, the federal government hasn't abandoned that accusation. Premier was asked about it, and he said, well, look, he said, first of all, it's up to the federal government to deal with India on a matter of international relations. This is a trade issue being dealt with at the provincial level, and we think there's some work to be done over there. And the other thing was, he said the case is before the courts, so charges have been laid. So he said he wouldn't say anything normally. So he's on his way to India, 5 days next week. Forestry, high tech, life sciences, critical minerals, and other trade issues. And the Premier says, which is true, we need to diversify our trading partners. India is becoming the third largest economy in the world, and British Columbia is already its biggest trading partners in Canada. So it makes sense on a number of levels. But politicians, trade missions, when I started a century ago, it used to be a big issue. Oh, they're junkets, and all that. Mike Harcourt, to his credit, when he became NDP leader, said, no, we need to do trade missions. He said, I'm not going to criticize the then social credit government for doing it, and our premiers and leaders have continued it ever since. Personal relations, government to government relations are important. I don't think you expect to see a bunch of trade deals signed, but this kind of work is important. And I've been on one of these trips, and they're not free junkets. The hours of work are such that you barely get a few minutes to yourself. So I don't think the Premier is going to be buying $16 glasses of orange juice next week.
No, and what we see, as you say, this is politicians, but it will, we hope, pave the way for some of our business leaders to go over there and close some deals and bring some money and commerce back.
Yeah, I think that's true. And look, we do need to diversify, although British Columbia's trading relationships are more diversified than most of Canada. But I mean, that's the rationale for building a pipeline across British Columbia to deliver natural gas, liquefied natural gas to world markets, because the only customer we had was the Americans. And the Premier of Alberta might argue that's the reason for building another oil pipeline through BC, but we'll leave that. That's a different issue.
Yeah. Well, the other big national agenda, big for BC, of course, is infrastructure. Mark Carney has announced a bunch of funding and support for infrastructure projects in BC. What happened to BC's Infrastructure Project Act?
This is a strange one. The Premier and the New Democrats last May pulled out all the stops to get passage of what they call the Infrastructure Projects Act. So this was legislation to make it easier to fast track and get permits approved to build schools, hospitals, and other public infrastructure in British Columbia, and some private projects that were designated by the government as in the public interest. So now the New Democrats, they pushed that legislation through the House. They cut off debate. They used their legislative majority to defeat the Conservatives, the Greens, and the One BC Party. The speaker broke a tie, and all of this was the Premier saying, we've got not a moment to spare. This has got to be done. This is all part of standing up to Donald Trump and his tariff threats to BC, and this will allow us to build schools and hospitals and other projects faster. So that was May. 8 months later, that legislation is still not in force. It hasn't been used to put one shovel in the ground because it's not in legal force. And asked the ministry, infrastructure ministry, we have a standalone infrastructure ministry, what's the holdup this week? And they said, we're involved in extensive consultations with First Nations, and they've asked more time. And so it may be more months before we ever get this thing into effect. Well, that's a major embarrassment for the government because if you go back to May, the government had to admit that we have laws in British Columbia, a matter of some contention, where the government promised to consult First Nations on legislation that affects them in advance and get their consent in advance. And they didn't do it on this bill. And they admitted they didn't do it. And they turned around and said, well, we'll consult them afterward. We'll pass the law and then we'll consult them, which is kind of, you know, cart before the horse stuff. Not surprisingly, the First Nations haven't been in any rush to consult on this, and they're asking more time. And the end result is this law that the Premier said was absolutely essential, not a moment to spare, we've got to get it through the House, still isn't in effect, and it may not be in effect for some months to come.
Well, the other thing we're waiting for on the other side of the House is for a new leader to be chosen for the Conservative Party. We have our interim leader there.
Yep.
What's that? Do we know anything more about what that process is going to look like and when a leader might be selected?
So John Rustad stepped down on December the 4th, so it was a month ago.
Mm.
And the first few weeks, the story was people who weren't interested in running for the job. You had federal MP Aaron Gunn, federal MP Ellis Ross, former BC Conservative, BC Liberal MLA Eleanor Sturco, MLA Gavin Dew, all saying, no, we're not doing it. So you're beginning to go like, is there anybody who actually wants this job? But we now got some candidates in. So we're starting to get them. You know, I think the holdup is related to the question you asked, Harold, which is what's this race going to look like? So the Conservatives have just appointed a panel, I think a dozen-member panel, 6 of them are lawyers, heaven help us, and they're going to meet next week to start laying out the rules for this. So we don't know how long the leadership race is going to take or what the rules are going to be. We don't know what people will have to pay as a fee to the party to run. And we don't know what candidates will be limited in terms of spending. And we don't know when the new leader will be in place. So I think that probably explains why some of the people out there are saying, well, you know, I may well run, but I want to see the rules first. And it may also explain why some people who are saying, well, I think I'll run, may discover that they can't necessarily afford it. And the other thing everybody wants to know is how long will candidates have to sign up new members? Because when Rustad stepped down, he said the party had only 6,500 members. And it would be good to have a few months to sign up new members because the leadership race, they'll bring their supporters in, a lot of interest and all that. So I hear that they'd like to have a leader in place before the legislature adjourns, May 29th, May 28th. Yeah, May 28th. They'd like to have a leader in place, some of them, because they think David Eby might call a snap election, although I don't think that's very likely. But I don't know. I don't know whether they'll have a leader in place before the House adjourns and rises for the spring or not. Time's running out. There's you could still have a full leadership race of, I don't know, 2 or 3 months when you get the rules in place, but we still don't have the rules, and they may not be in place till the end of January.
So who has put their hand up so far, however tentatively?
Well, Warren Ham was the first in. He's a contractor from Rossland. Yuri Fulmer. Fulmer almost won. He's a business leader from the North Shore, from West Vancouver. He almost won the West Vancouver seat, lost it to Jeremy Faleriati, the Green. He's a major business figure, 3 dozen A&W franchises, so I guess we'll be calling him the Burger King at some point, whether or not his candidacy comes with fries. And we got Sheldon Clare, not a household name. He is, however, the Conservative MLA for Prince George North, so one of the ridings in the interior. He told Prince George Citizen this week that he's running. Fulmer's already got a video out on YouTube and press releases and a campaign organization, so he's pretty serious. And then we move on to, there's a half dozen people have indicated pretty strongly that they're thinking of running, although we don't have an official campaign yet.
Okay. And will Rustad be involved at all?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, as a former leader, he probably should say something like, I'm not going to endorse anybody. I guess we might be looking to see where the people that work closely with him are working.
Right.
There's some thought that, the traditional kind of conservative party that Rustad represented that came out of the Liberal Party might be closely aligned with Chris Gardner. He's the head of the Independent Contractors Association, and he's expected to announce he's running maybe as early as next week. So, as I said, I'd be surprised if Rustad comes out and endorses anybody, but we might look at it and say, well, he's close to that. We think former Liberal BC United MLA, now Conservative MLA, Peter Millibar, he may well run. Who other names do you have? We got Daryl Jones, this guy from Save On Foods. He's talked about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's other candidates. Ian Black, former BC Liberal MLA and former head of Vancouver Board of Trade. He's thought to be taking it pretty seriously. So they could end up with a field. Oh, Carolyn Finlay, former federal Conservative MP. They could end up with a half dozen candidates in a field, which is a pretty good field. And they could have a pretty lively leadership race too, given the ideological, range of those candidates.
Well, the range of the candidates and the range of the membership, as we discovered, I guess, in recent months. Well, that'll be great. Well, we'll keep an eye on that with you for sure, Vaughn. Thank you. Have a great week.
We'll talk next week.